Right now, in a shed somewhere, a chainsaw older than you sits waiting. Pour in fresh fuel, yank the cord twice, and it screams back to life like the last 40 years never happened. They don't build them like this anymore. All Stihl, all magnesium, all attitude. These are the 10 saws that ruled the 1980s, the machines loggers trusted with their lives and their livelihoods. Some are worth thousands today. Number 1, still a legend. Let's go. Number 10. Poulan 3400 CounterVibe. Kicking things off at number 10 is a saw that a lot of American families cut their teeth on, the Poulan 3400 CounterVibe. Now, before Poulan became the budget homeowner brand you see stacked on shelves today, it was a serious outfit out of Shreveport, Louisiana, building rugged saws that stood shoulder to shoulder with Homelite, McCulloch, and Pioneer. The 3400 CounterVibe carried that reputation into the 1980s. It ran a roughly 56cc two-stroke engine, around 3.4 cubic inches, which is exactly where the 3400 name comes from, and it was aimed squarely at the homeowner and small farm crowd who needed to buck firewood and drop the occasional tree without spending pro-saw money. The headline feature, and the reason for that CounterVibe badge, was its anti-vibration system. In an era when a lot of saws would rattle your fillings loose after an afternoon of cutting, Poulan built rubber isolation between the engine and the handles to soak up the shaking. That was a genuine comfort upgrade, and it made long days a whole lot easier on your hands and forearms. Here's a bit of Poulan trivia to file away too. The 3046A's older cousin, the Poulan 306A, is the actual chainsaw that Leatherface swung around in the original 1974 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That saw was discontinued right at the start of the 80s, but its legend loomed over everything Poulan built afterward, including this one. The 3400 CounterVibe wasn't the fanciest saw of the decade, and it wasn't the most powerful. But it was affordable, it was tough, and it introduced a lot of regular folks to the world of gas chainsaws. That's exactly why it earns the number 10 spot. Number 9. McCulloch Pro Mac 700. At number 9, we've got a genuine American heavyweight, the McCulloch Pro Mac 700. McCulloch was a Los Angeles company founded by Robert Paxton McCulloch back in 1943. And by the 1970s and 80s, they were absolutely everywhere in North America. The Pro Mac 700 was one of their big-bore workhorses. It packed a 70.5cc engine, or about 4.3 cubic inches, and it was built the way saws used to be built: a die-cast magnesium body, a centrifugal clutch, and an automatic oiler with a manual override, so you could give the bar an extra squirt when you needed it. Production ran from 1977 all the way through 1988, which means this saw spanned almost the entire decade we're talking about. It was a one-man saw, but a beefy one, happy to run bars up in the 20-inch and beyond range for felling and bucking bigger timber. McCulloch saws of this era had a very distinct personality. They were loud, they had that unmistakable Mac exhaust bark, and they had grunt. Owners loved them because they were relatively simple, they cut hard, and they kept going. The trade-off was weight. These were not light saws, and finding parts down the road could get tricky as the company changed hands. But in its prime, the Pro Mac 700 was exactly the kind of saw a serious firewood cutter or a rancher wanted hanging in the shed. It represented an entire class of American-built power equipment that defined the way the US cut wood in the 80s. And while the brand eventually faded from the professional world, saws like the Pro Mac 700 are the reason so many people still say with a grin that nothing beats the sound of a Mac. Number 9. The McCulloch Pro Mac 700. Number 8. Stihl 044. Now we jump to a saw that arrived near the end of the decade and completely rewrote the rulebook for what a pro saw could be, the Stihl 044. The 044 hit the market in 1988 and stayed in production all the way to 2001. That's a 13-year run, which tells you everything about how good it was. It's a roughly 70cc professional saw, and to this day it's regularly named one of the best chainsaws Stihl has ever built. It later evolved into the MS-440, and even now, decades later, working sawyers still hunt these down. What made 044 special was its power-to-weight ratio. Stihl squeezed serious 70cc muscle into a chassis that didn't feel like you were hauling a cinder block through the woods. It had strong torque, it revved cleanly, and it was tough enough to survive daily abuse on a professional crew. But here's the fact that makes the 044 genuinely historic. In 1989, Stihl launched a version called the 044C, and that saw was the first chainsaw in the world to be fitted with a catalytic converter. Stihl had developed the world's first catalytic converter for a two-stroke engine, a system that cut hazardous hydrocarbons in the exhaust by somewhere between 70 and 80%. Think about that for a second. At the tail end of the 1980s, while most saws were still belching raw two-stroke smoke, Stihl was already engineering emissions technology into a handheld tool that was decades ahead of its time. So the 044 isn't just a great saw, it's a milestone. It closed out the 80s by pointing straight at the future of the entire industry, and that's why it lands at number 8. Number 7. Homelite Super XL Automatic. At number 7 is a saw that is pure, distilled Americana, the Homelite Super XL Automatic. A red machine that some collectors nicknamed Big Red. Homelite got its start way back in 1921, and by the time the 80s rolled around, the Super XL family had already been in the field for years. The original Super XL design dates to the 1960s, but here's the thing. It was so good and so beloved that Homelite kept building versions of it well into the 1980s and even the early 1990s. When a design survives that long, it's because it just plain works. The Super XL Automatic ran a roughly 58cc two-stroke engine, about 3.55 cubic inches from a 46mm bore. It had a die-cast magnesium body, that signature Homelite red paint, and an automatic chain oiler with a manual override plunger for when you wanted extra lubrication. It typically shipped with a 16-inch or 24-inch bar, so it could handle everything from limbing to bucking decent-sized logs. One feature worth calling out is the safe T-tip. This was an anti-kickback guard that bolted right onto the nose of the bar, physically covering the exact spot where dangerous kickback starts. Now, the Super XL didn't have a modern chain brake, so this was Homelite's answer to keeping weekend cutters safe. A simple mechanical solution to a very real danger. This is the saw that a whole generation of American dads and granddads owned. It was reliable. It was rebuildable, and parts were everywhere. Ask around at any old sawmill or firewood operation, and someone will have a story about a Super XL that ran for 30 years on a spark plug and a prayer. It's a legend of the American backyard, and it earns number 7. Number 6. Jonsered 630, sliding in at number 6. Let's cross the Atlantic to Sweden for a saw that professional cutters still speak about in near-reverent tones, the Jonsered 630. Jonsered is one of the great old Swedish names, and the mid-1980s was smack in the middle of the brand's golden age. The 630 was a roughly 61cc saw, and it belonged to the famous 625, 630, 670 family. A lineup that shared an enormous amount of DNA with the Husqvarna 61, 266, 268, and 272. That's because in the late 1970s, Jonsered became part of the Electrolux group, which already owned Husqvarna. So under the hood, these red and black Swedes and their orange husky cousins were engineering siblings. What made the 630 special was its character. It was a high-torque saw with a reputation for absolutely brutal longevity. The kind of machine that firewood cutters and small landowners would beat on for decades and still not kill. It was relatively simple to maintain. It spun up to around 13,000 RPM, and it had that solid all-business feel that Swedish saws became famous for. Professionals loved the 630 because it hit a sweet spot. Enough power to work all day in medium and large timber, but a balance and build quality that made it a pleasure to run. And that gorgeous red and black paint job didn't hurt either. Even people who don't love chainsaws admit these things are handsome. The 630 is often mentioned in the same breath as the best saws ever made. And while its cousin, the 670 Champ, would arrive around 1990 with even more grunt, it was the 630 that carried the Jonsered name through the heart of the 1980s. A quiet legend from Sweden. Number 6. Number 5. Husqvarna. 254. Halfway through the countdown, at number 5, is a saw that marked a real turning point for one of the biggest names in the business, the Husqvarna 254. Husqvarna is an ancient Swedish company. It literally started as a weapons foundry back in 1689, and by the 1980s, it was one of the 2 or 3 most important chainsaw manufacturers on Earth. The 254 arrived in 1986 and stayed in production all the way to 2001. It's a 54cc saw, and it landed right when Husqvarna was transitioning its professional line from the old SE designation over to the XP badge, that's extra power, which is why you'll see these saws marketed as the 254 XP. Now, 54cc might not sound huge on paper, but the whole point of the 254 was that it wasn't just another ordinary saw in that class. Husqvarna's engineers set out to build something that stood apart, and they delivered a machine with a fantastic power-to-weight ratio, low vibration, and one very clever feature, air injection. Air injection is a centrifugal air cleaning system that flings the heavy sawdust and debris away from the air filter before it ever gets there. The result is a filter that stays cleaner far longer, which means more consistent power and a lot less downtime spent cleaning filters in the field. On a saw you're running hard all day, that's a genuinely big deal. Add in a die-cast magnesium build, a chain brake, an automatic oiler, and that famous Husqvarna orange, and you had a saw that professionals trusted and homeowners aspired to own. People who ran the 254 describe it as perfectly balanced and, in their words, unstoppable. It's a saw that punched way above its 54 cubic centimeters, and it helped cement Husqvarna's dominance heading into the 90s. Number 5. The Husqvarna 254. Number 4. McCulloch Pro Mac 610. At number 4, we return to McCulloch for what might be the single most recognizable homeowner saw in 1980s America, the Pro Mac 610. If you grew up in the States in this era, there's a very good chance your family, your neighbor, or your uncle owned one of these. The Pro Mac 610 was a 60cc saw, about 3.7 cubic inches, and it was sold absolutely everywhere. It's a blocky, heavy, no-nonsense machine, and it earned itself an affectionate nickname from the people who ran it, the McBrick. And yeah, it earned that name honestly. The 610 tipped the scales around 18 pounds, so it was no lightweight, but that heft came from a rugged die-cast magnesium body, and the payoff was a saw that felt genuinely indestructible. It had an automatic oiler with a manual override, a full 60cc of grunt, and that classic Mac sound that owners describe as pure music. What really made the 610 dominant was availability and value. This wasn't a boutique professional saw with a matching price tag. It was a powerful machine that a regular working family could actually afford, and it delivered. Owners talk about 610s built in the early 80s that are still running today, decades later starting on the first or second pull. One owner summed it up perfectly. Made in 1983, and it still runs like a scalded dog. Parts were plentiful, the design was simple, and the thing just refused to die. For an entire generation, the Pro Mac 610 was the chainsaw, the default choice for firewood, storm cleanup, and clearing land. It's not the most refined saw on this list, and it's definitely not the lightest. But in terms of sheer 1980s dominance in the American market, few saws can touch it. The mighty McBrick takes number 4. Number 3. Stihl 028 Super Wood Boss. Onto the podium now. At number 3 is the saw that put Stihl in more American garages than possibly any other model of the era, the Stihl 028, especially in its super and wood boss forms. The 028 was first introduced back in 1977 and stayed in production all the way to 1998. An incredible 21-year run. That kind of longevity doesn't happen by accident. The base 028 ran about 47cc from a 44mm bore, but in 1983 Stihl launched 028 AV Super, which bumped the bore up to 46mm for roughly 51.5cc and a healthy jump in power. Depending on the market and the year, these saws also wore names like Wood Boss and Farm Boss, marketing badges for what was essentially the same tough little workhorse. And tough is the word every owner reaches for. The 028 has a reputation for being virtually bulletproof. It weighs in around 12.6 pounds, revs to about 12,500 RPM, and it's built from die-cast magnesium with a chrome-plated cylinder bore. It's the kind of saw people describe as starting on the second pull after sitting in a barn for 15 years, and honestly the stories bear that out. The O28 also rode the wave of a major safety shift happening in the 1980s. This was the decade when the chain brake and Stihl's quick-stop system became mainstream, and later O28s came with electronic ignition, and that automatically triggered brake features that made the saw dramatically safer than the machines of the 70s. What makes the O28 so important is who bought it. Not just loggers, but farmers, ranchers, landowners, and serious weekend woodcutters by the hundreds of thousands. It hit the perfect intersection of power, weight, price, and reliability. Ask a longtime Stihl dealer about the saw that built their customer base, and a whole lot of them will point straight at the O28, a true people's champion. Number 3. Number 2. Husqvarna 266. At number 2, we have a saw that professional loggers will defend to their last breath, the Husqvarna 266. Introduced in 1981, the 266 sat at the heart of Husqvarna's legendary 61, 162, 266 family, a group of 60cc class saws that shared a common platform and a common reputation for being nearly unkillable. The 266 was a professional-grade machine, built around a roughly 67cc two-stroke engine in its later and XP forms, and it was designed for one thing above all: high torque, all-day cutting in real timber. This was the saw that put Husqvarna on the map for a whole generation of North American loggers. It had the power to pull a big bar through hardwood, the durability to survive a professional's daily grind, and a magnesium build that could take a beating. Owners describe using it to chew through 24-inch seasoned oak that made newer, weaker saws struggle, and the 266 just kept eating. That's the reputation this saw built, log by log. The design was also refreshingly straightforward, which meant it was relatively easy to maintain and repair, a huge selling point for professionals who couldn't afford to have a saw down during the busy season. And because so many of these were built, and because they shared parts with the Jonsered 625, 630, 670 family and the later Husqvarna 268 and 272, keeping a 266 alive was, and still is, very doable. Here's the real testament to the 266. People are still running them hard today. You'll find sawyers who inherited a 266 from their father or grandfather, saws that have been felling trees and bucking firewood for 40+ years and show no signs of quitting. When a tool inspires that kind of multi-generational loyalty, you know it earned it. The 266 is one of the most respected professional saws of the entire decade, and it comes in at a very well-deserved number 2. Number 1. Stihl 038, and that brings us to number 1. The saw that more than any other defined professional cutting across the entire decade, the Stihl 038. Here's why it takes the crown. The 038 went into production in 1980, right at the dawn of the decade, and stayed in production all the way to 1993. That means this saw didn't just visit the 1980s, it lived the entire decade front to back in the hands of loggers and firewood cutters on every continent. The 038 came in a whole family of variants, and this is where it gets fun. The base 038 AV ran a 48mm bore for around 61.5 cc. Step up to the 038 Super, and you got a 50mm bore for roughly 67 cc. And at the very top sat the mighty 038 Magnum, with a 52mm bore pushing it up to around 72 cc of big bore torque monster power. That Magnum in particular is the one collectors and old sawyers get misty-eyed about. Many consider it one of the finest saws Stihl ever produced. The earliest 038s used old-school points and condenser ignition. But as the decade rolled on, the saw gained electronic ignition and the quick-stop chain brake, riding that same wave of 1980s safety innovation we've mentioned throughout this list. Through it all, the 038 kept its core identity, a rugged, high-torque professional saw built to run bigger bars and handle serious timber, day in and day out. What earns it the top spot is its combination of power, toughness, and sheer staying power. This was a saw you could stake your livelihood on. It was heavy, sure, and it was all business, but when you needed to drop a big tree or buck a mountain of hardwood, the 038 delivered every single time. The parts got harder to find over the years, but the saws themselves refused to die, which is exactly why they're still prized on the used market decades later. The Stihl 038 didn't just dominate a year or a market, it dominated the whole decade. And that's why it is, without question, our #1 chainsaw of the 1980s. If you enjoyed this trip back through the golden age of gas saws, do me a favor and hit that like button. It genuinely helps the channel out. And if you want more deep dives into classic tools, vintage machinery, and the equipment that built the modern world, subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching. Now go put a fresh chain on that old saw, mix up some two-stroke, and make some sawdust. I'll see you in the next one.